I'm in Łódź, and you've probably never heard of it. You see, when most people come to Poland, they go to Warszawa, Kraków, maybe the port city of Gdańsk. But what about Poland's third largest city? How's that doing? Judging by the look of this place, it's not looking too good. But let's not be so quick to judge. I'm in the neighborhood of Bałty, an area of the city where my grandma has lived for most of her life. She was born in 1936. She lived through the war, the German occupation, the Soviet liberation, and the decades of communism that followed. Here are such reminders of those times. The old cinema, Ivanovo, named after the Russian city that Łódź was twinned with back in the times of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. Once the most technologically advanced cinema in the country. Now it's quite a decrepit old building. My grandma would have come here, my mum as well. Not for Western movies though, there was no Hollywood around here. Just Polish films by Polish directors, many of who were educated right here in the film school, the most accredited in the whole country. Figures such as Roman Polanski and others that we've probably never heard of. The old shopping districts, once common in every neighborhood of the city, well, they still operate, but not at the same capacity. Well, I'm visiting my family, but I'd like to take you a walk through my hometown, the city where I was born and lived for the first 7 years of my life. Maybe together we can find out why nobody really visits, and maybe why they should. Now our journey begins down Bolesława Limanowskiego Street, named after Bolesław Limanowski, a prominent socialist of the 1920s. Now this street takes us to the city centre, but it also takes us to a more sinister place, the Łódź Ghetto, the second largest in all of German occupied Europe, housing around 160,000 people during the war. It was also the last ghetto to be liquidated, operating until the late 1944. Of the 160,000 that were there when the Soviets liberated, only 800 survivors remained. The National Parks of Poland. Now these housing blocks, common throughout all of the communist world, they were built after the war, designed to be built efficiently at a low cost and to house the workers to restart the economy. Over there you see LKS, tags common throughout the city. LKS standing for Łódzki Klub Sportowy, one of the two football clubs in the city, the other one being Widzew. Now there's a serious turf war going on. The area we're in right now, Bałty, is predominantly LKS, but the firms, they go to each other's turfs and tag and fight. Yeah, it's pretty serious business. And you'll notice as we reach as we're nearing the city centre, I should say, blocks such as these will be slowly replaced by the older ones. Now we're nearing the old part of the neighborhood, Stare Bałty. Now a lot of these buildings, they're still lived in, Got no doubt many of those will be knocked down and turned into new apartment blocks.
Ładny mural, nie?
Piękny.
No.
We're coming to the end of Limanowskiego Street, the part of the city that housed the Łódź Ghetto. 160,000 people forced into hard labor. No doubt it would have looked a lot different only 80 years ago. You see, before the war, Łódź was up to 40% Jewish. That's not the case anymore. Some say now the city is about 40% degenerate, but I think that's quite harsh. These are the city guards. They're probably driving around looking for jaywalkers. You see, jaywalking is a serious crime in Poland. Very serious indeed. That's why when there's nothing approaching, you'll see everyone waiting nicely. If not, you get it on the spot fine. No questions asked. Now we're entering the heart of the city. These 19th century red brick buildings were once a textile factory ran by Izrael Poznański, probably the most prominent businessman of the times. Now about 20 years ago, the city invested into these pretty much abandoned buildings and turned them into, well, an icon of the city, you could say. Manufaktura. I slept in that A once, but that's a long story. Or maybe it was the U, I don't remember. Now most of these buildings were constructed in the 19th century, and no doubt back then it would have been a bit of a different vibe around here. Not so much entertainment and leisure and expensive restaurants, more like hard labor for low wages. If you can just get the scale of this place. Look, we went in where that Ferris wheel is, and this is the main shopping district. Now the owner of this factory Israel Poznański. Him and his family were prominent business owners in the city at the time. They funded many of the synagogues that were destroyed in 1939 as soon as the Germans entered. And whilst the majority of the workforce, they lived in these crumbling buildings, this was the palace of Israel Poznański, his main residence. Now it's the Museum of the City of Łódź. Grand building. Now this is the front of Israel Poznański's palace, where he was famously renowned, apparently, for making speeches from the balcony to the people, to the workers. Grand speeches about his visions for the city and his future business ventures, no doubt. But it really is a special piece of work. Now we'll make our way down to Independence Square, where Piotrkowska Street starts. It was actually the longest commercial street in the world at the time, running about 4 kilometers. And like I mentioned, the countless factories that were here before, Łódź was actually the textile capital of the textile industry. I mean, in all of Europe at the time. Now they used to call this city the Manchester of the East for all the industries that were here, and it actually used to be the second largest city in Poland by population, peaking at about 1 million. Now today it's the third, maybe fourth, population of around 670,000. Many people left, I guess myself included. Now this is Independence Square. Last time I was here it was completely closed for renovations, but I guess it's finished now. Like a lot of the city, all the main roads, tunnels, new train stations. Since Poland went into the EU in 2004, since they joined, a lot of money's been getting pumped into Łódź, into Poland in general. A lot of the highways, actually pretty much all of the highways, are being redone. And a lot of the cities, Łódź was actually the most invested in, I guess, due to the number of crumbling buildings and the opportunities. And this is the historic Piotrkowska Street, the main street in Łódź. Whilst this is the main street in Łódź and quite beautiful and well looked after, doesn't take long as soon as you hit one of these side streets to go back out into areas that, well, they look like they were better during the war. Now we're in the city center, and this too was a palace that belonged to the Poznański family, like many of the buildings on this street. Grand designs. That behind me is another one of Poznański's palaces. Now over the centuries, Łódź, well, it belonged to many different countries at some certain point in time. So the architecture here, and well, these are getting pulled apart. These would have been some old factories right here as well. No doubt making way for new apartment blocks. Well, as I was saying, over the decades and the centuries, Łódź, well, it belonged to different people. At one point in time, it was Russian, German. It had one of the largest Jewish populations, and of course, Polish. So the architecture, I guess, reflects all of that in a bit, in a way, whatever. Now, Łódź has a reputation, even in Poland, for being a bit rough around the edges. Like I said, even though Łódź was so heavily impacted by the war, many of the buildings were untouched. And unlike Warsaw, where around 80% of the buildings were destroyed, many of the pre-war buildings remain. 1903. Buildings crumbling so much they had to put a net over it to stop rocks hitting people on the head. Guess that's one way of doing it. Now, as I mentioned before, Łódź is known for these murals, for the street art.
Jeszcze jest przed nami Zdroż gotowy I nocami tam nad drogami
That over there is another cinema, one of the many in the city. This one's still operational, unlike the one from the beginning. And I'm walking down Piotrkowska Street, and you may have noticed that I kind of run out of facts to tell you. I should have done my homework a bit more, and considering this is my hometown, I should know more, but it is what it is. I'll just show you the sights. Now, even though I won't be able to tell you exactly, all these fancy looking buildings would have been palaces of the business owners as well. And here, feels like I'm discovering the city myself. Now, Łódź in Poland means ship. I guess that's why there's a big ship behind me. Even though it's in the middle of the country, it's not on the coast, and the rivers that used to run through it have mostly been covered up and used up by the factories to power them. main business district of the city, an area that the locals refer to as Manhattan. Now, I've been to Manhattan, I don't really see the resemblance. So I'm still in Łódź, and I went over the footage that I got yesterday. I showed you the town center and the Bałty. Now, I wasn't too happy with the footage. I was a bit dry on the camera, wasn't I? So I'm going somewhere else today. Going to a place where I haven't been in 20 years. It's actually the part of the city where I lived when I was here. So I haven't been there in so long. I'll show you where I went to nursery or kindergarten, for as some of you call it. And yeah, might not even be there anymore. The place was a mess when I was there, and I don't imagine it changed much.
Linia numer 8, kierunek Cmentarz Zarzew.
So I've got the tram across the whole city to show you. Block 626 in Łódź Dąbrowa. Now this is where I lived for the first 7 years of my life, and the place is almost unrecognizable. Wow. This is it, and I was on the second floor, door number 53. I bet you didn't have a concrete elephant to play with as a kid. That was here long before me. Probably will be here long after me as well. Oh, this neighborhood's a lot smaller than I remember. I remember thinking it was such a long walk to get to nursery. So this is where I went to school, and this is where I went to nursery. Fajniejsze przedszkole. Wow. Doesn't look like it changed much. The Town Nursery number 129. Now this neighborhood, unlike Bauty where we were yesterday, is closer to Widzew, the other football club, so you'll see a lot more of their tags as opposed to LKS. Now I'm in Podolski Park, and this church I used to go to when I was a kid. Now I remember thinking it was such a long walk when I've been walking for about 5 minutes from the block where I grew up. It's not really as exciting as I thought. Well, I feel a bit sick today, which is not good because in a few days I'm going somewhere a bit different to Poland, somewhere a bit warmer, somewhere which I think will be quite fun. And yeah, I've got big things planned.
Jeszcze jest przed nami noc mała, i nocami tam nad drogami.